Good evening, everyone. This is Glenn Richards, Chairman of the Newburyport Historical Commission. It's about 7:01 on Thursday, the 10th of June, 2021. Another virtual meeting via Zoom of the Historical Commission, Newburyport Historical Commission. We'll do a quick roll call so we can see who is here and make sure we have audio and video working well for our various members. I believe Mr. Carnwath is absent. I'm not seeing him anywhere. Let's just check the attendee list. Don't see him there either. So we'll skip him. We'll assume Mr. Carnwath is absent. Mr. Mark Cendrone.
Present.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Christopher Fay, is he here? Has he come in?
Here.
Oh, there he is. Just joined. Great. Good to have you, Chris. Mr. Peter McNamee.
Here.
You're here. Very good. Joe Morgan.
Here.
Patricia Peckneck, Vice Chair. Okay, you were a little low there, Patricia. We did hear you, but it was a little bit low, but very good.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Oh, that's good. That last one came in loud and clear, and the chair, Glenn Richards, were here. So we have one absentee. I'll make a note of that. Quick adjustment here. Keep everything on the up and up here. Okay, very good. So a couple of initial rules. I'll go fairly briefly because I think we're pretty much familiar with these. As with other Zoom meetings, only the commissioners will have audio enabled. You can see us, we cannot see you. One member of the public at a time will be unmuted during public hearing periods, and I'll explain how that works in a second. Applicants and their representatives will, of course, be unmuted for their presentations and during any Q&A period, etc. Now, if there's a public comment period, which will be announced, of course, and you wish to speak, you need to raise your hand using the Zoom control to do that. It's usually, if you're on a device with a video, it's down the button on the lower left-hand corner. It says mute and unmute. So you need to do it on your end. We will also do it on our end. So there's two unmutes that have to happen. If you're on a telephone, you do *9 to raise a hand. That's how we know you want to speak, and *6 to unmute. And again, raising your hand is a Zoom function for that as well. That's how we know you'd like to make a statement. All right. And commissioners, just a reminder, you've been good at this, but I still remind you, if you're making a motion or seconding, just mention your name as well, so we can, for the record, so we know who said what. So with that, I think we can begin with the first item on the agenda. It's a demo delay application involving a roof line change. Excuse me, the applicant wants to build up an addition over first floor to add a second floor, same footprint and so on. It's the roof line change triggered a review since the structure dated from 1900. So we need to determine whether the structure is historically significant and considered for preservation. If we find that it is either not historically significant, or it might be historically significant but not considered for preservation, that means we don't see that means we don't see sufficient historical value in the structure to prohibit this or a future applicant to execute either this project or some future project, including up to and including full demolition, I believe. Andy, did you see my email about that?
My apologies. I may have not have
okay.
Respond.
It was, and we can come back to that, but well, actually, let's deal with it right now. The question was, I'm pretty sure that if we determine tonight that, for example, the structure is not historically significant, that's sort of a permanent designation, and that 3 years from now, if there's some other project, they would not have to get the same determination that's already been determined.
That's correct. That's okay. Correct. Yeah.
All right. So we get one shot at that. Now, if and only if we find that the structure should be considered for preservation, then there will be a public hearing and review of the demolition plans, followed by a vote as to whether we approve of those plans or impose the demolition delay, the 1-year demo delay. Now, lately we've been doing sort of two initial votes just to make things perfectly clear, and we can do that. I think a number of us preferred it that way, so we can do one vote as whether or not it's historically significant, and a second vote as to whether it's considered for preservation. Of course, we'd only need that if it was historically significant. So I plan to follow that same thing. I think that's pretty much the plan we've decided we'd like to go with. So having said that, I'd like to turn it over to the attendee who is on this. I believe I see Scott Brown and attorney, is it Douglas? Duchesne, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have an attorney representing the applicant, and Scott Brown, I believe, is the architect. And so why don't you go ahead and present um, your case here, so to speak.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. Douglas Duchesne, attorney with Finneran and Nicholson here in Newburyport, representing 7 Harbor Street Nominee Trust, which is the trust that controls the property. I would like to introduce Jacqueline Bennett, who is here with me this evening. Jacqueline is technically, or is legally, the underlying owner of the property, although it is titled in the trust. Also, as you mentioned, with us this evening, Scott Brown, our architect. Ms. Bennett would like to add a relatively small addition to the property. And as you can see, I did provide to the board pictures of the existing home and elevations of the existing home, and then plans showing the proposed addition, which is over the second story addition over the existing first floor footprint. Ms. Bennett has been involved in the community in Newburyport for over 35 years and currently operates her international business out here in Newburyport. So she has had significant experience with historic structures and owns historic homes. So she is certainly well aware of the historic nature of buildings. However, as we've presented to the board, this home does not appear to have any significant historical design or structure. And so we are hoping that we can move forward with the addition. I'd like to give Scott an opportunity to give the board a little more detail on the proposal and how it is that we feel it is not historical significance. Scott?
Yeah, Scott, if you could, the first thing we need to address is whether or not it's historically significant. So whatever you can provide on background, the actual plans of what you intend to do can come later, because if the initial decision we have to make is whether it is about the historical significance in particular. And I know there's supposed to be some historical background information that the applicant is supposed to provide about the history of the house. So if you can speak to any of that, that would be great.
Well, good evening, Scott. Scott Brown, the architect for the project. So what we're seeing right now, these are some existing condition photos. 3 of these 4 were taken in 2014. So in reviewing this application, I was reminded that almost a year ago to the day, I was before you folks for a project at 39 Harbor Street, which is a little ways up the way, a little ways up the street from this one. On that project, I was caught by surprise by the age of the house as listed on the assessor's data card. On this project at 7 Harbor, I was also caught by the surprise of the age of the house. So what both of these houses have in common, like probably so many other houses on Plum Island, is that they've been almost entirely reworked over the years. This one at 7 Harbor has a new foundation. Much of the older fabric has been stripped away, and it last underwent a major interior renovation in 2014 by the previous homeowners, and 3 of these 4 photos were taken more or less in 2014. So in 2014, it was mostly an interior renovation, but also think at that time that, vinyl windows were put in the house, and also the vinyl siding that we're seeing in these photos as well. So, but unlike 39 Harbor, this house does have some visible older bones, but very, very few of them. In the basement, I was able to, in our existing condition photos, was able to see some older framing members that do appear to be, early 20th century to me. But like I had already just mentioned, there's very, very little that is left. I do think, in my humble opinion, I don't find anything about this house to be historically significant in terms of, what has happened here in the past or who has lived here in the past. And I certainly don't find anything to be historically significant from a design standpoint. It is a Plum Island cottage. This addition, which I will speak to in a little bit, I do think is modest in nature, and I do not think it's going to change the character of this structure.
Mhm. All right. Thank you, Scott, if I can be so informal as to call you by your first name. All right, thank you. So do either of you, I guess it would probably be Scott, and have any information as to what was originally built at the turn of the last century, or is that kind of an unknown factor at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I did conduct some research down at the town hall and in the building department to see what, if any, records I could find with respect to, they certainly had no records with respect to the original construction.
Right.
But I did want to see what, if anything, they had with respect to changes that have occurred. I had assumed that, in looking at the structure, some of these different wings off the main body obviously are more modern in nature. But surprisingly, the building department and the planning department, the only records they had were of that 2016 renovation, which, as Scott mentioned, was relatively significant in terms of a complete internal gutting of the property, and then windows and siding changes, but there were no major structural changes made in 2014. But other than that, sir, I was not able to find any records that provided any insight into the original construction or usage, other than it was assumed that it was used as a summer cottage, as many of the homes, or not most of the homes, were back then.
Yep. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and Mr. Chairman, if I had to guess here, and it's a little hard to tell because, like I said, most of the framing in the basement is newer, and it's has new block foundation. If I had to guess, I think the original form of this might have been kind of the front-facing gable structure that we're seeing there, and all of the other sheds and later masses were at later additions that were added on to that original form.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a little hard to tell. But an impression I had at one point was that there's that farmhouse style. That's the two gable roofs, that are in kind of a T formation. I see a lot of those in Maine and throughout New England. But it's I don't know the proportions. I don't know if that's quite right either. So yeah, it's difficult to tell without a whole big analysis. All right. Well, thanks very much for that. Why don't I see if my peers on the panel here have any question they'd like to ask, and then I'll allow for a brief. I'll see if anyone from the public has any comment to make on the historical value or lack of it, and then we'll move on. So, commissioners, does anyone have a question for the applicant, or want to say something about that or address the topic of whether this is historically significant? I'll have to get a sound effect of crickets when this happens. Okay, so I'm not hearing any. I did see, I know sometimes people do like to comment on this, and I do see a name I recognize as a member of the Preservation Trust. They may or may not want to comment on this, but I'll open a very brief public comment period. So if there is a member of the public who would like to make a statement about this particular structure and its significance, you can raise your hand. If not, we'll move on. So I'll just allow a moment here while I take a sip of water to see if anyone. I do see a hand, Andy. Do you want to? Okay, so Stephanie, you're unmuted on our side, so you can speak.
Hello, this is actually Tom Colder-John
Hi, Tom. Yeah.
on Stephanie's computer. Mine's having problems with the Zoom thing, so she's graciously let me use her computer tonight. My only, and I'm only commenting because you asked for comment on it.
Well, it wasn't required, but go ahead.
Okay. From what I can see from the photos and so forth, it certainly does not look like a 1900s structure. There may be some bones inside that date from that period. It's hard to believe, but it's possible. It certainly doesn't present itself as something, in my personal opinion, is worth preserving. So there you have it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. All right, we will close the public comment period then, and let me go back to my panel. If no one has a comment or a question beyond that or any deliberation, we can talk about it. I see Christopher, you unmuted yourself. Did you want to say something?
No, I'm just getting ready, but no, the only question I had was answered.
Okay. Would the chair would be willing to entertain a motion at this point if someone would care to make one? If you do, it would be the way we make the motions is as a positive statement. So even if your opinion is that it's not historically significant, the motion would be that it is historically significant, and we would vote yes or no depending on that. So would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, Chris. I'll make a motion that I guess I'm trying to frame this in a positive way, that the home is no longer historically significant.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound right?
Well, the positive way to state is that the motion would be that the home is historically significant, but and if you disagree with that statement, you would just vote no.
Okay. Well, then I won't make that motion.
All right. Well, can you make it the other way?
That it's not historically significant?
No, that it is.
No, I can't.
Wow. All right. Well, it's sort of a.
This is Andy. Just to echo what the chair was noting, it's similar to the Board of Appeals. It's really just about the parliamentary procedure and the structure of the motion. It doesn't mean that that's your indication or vote here. It just means that that's the way that the board is expected to make its motions formally. Your action could then vote against that action. It's just it's all about how boards are expected to make motions formally in their meetings. Like that's what Glenn was pointing out, is just that it's all the structure of the motion, not what you're voting.
Yeah, I was trying to explain that, perhaps not successfully. So, I'm reading between the lines here, Chris. I can see that you'd feel it's not, but the motion would still be that it is, and you would simply vote no, as
I will make the motion that is historically significant.
All right, thank you, Chris. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second that.
That sounded like Peter and someone else, so we do have seconds. Okay, so I'll go quickly through the roll. Mr. Syndrome?
No, it is not.
Okay, 1 second here. Okay, Mr. Fay?
No.
Okay, Peter McNamee?
No.
Mr. Joe Morgan?
No.
Okay, Ms. Pecknick?
No.
Okay, and the chair is just only slightly reluctantly also saying no. So that means that we've decided that it is not historically significant. So that means you meaning the applicant and their attorneys and architects, you do not have to perspire about a demolition delay or even a demo plan review. Technically, we will notify the planning department and the building inspector, or whatever, I forget what the title is now, that you would be allowed to get a permit to perform your project.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming in, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate your time and the board's time. Good night.
Good night. Give me 1 second, I'll make a note here. Okay. Next item on the agenda is one second, sorry, it's very helpful if I kind of do this in real time so things don't get lost. The Masonry pamphlet discussion. So I think Mr. Coulter-John is going to talk to that. This was a, well, why don't I let you introduce it, Tom? We don't have to do it twice. Why don't you explain briefly to the commission? I know you did a little bit of that at the last meeting, what the purpose of this is, and anything else you'd like to say about it.
This is Tom Coulter-John, 64 Federal Street, co-president of the Newburyport Preservation Trust. I'm, I guess, offering this tonight. This is an updated historic masonry pamphlet or brochure. And the reason I guess I'm offering this tonight is that while I was on the Historic Commission, I wrote the first one. And the first one was used for many years by the Historic Commission because we had lots of people coming before us back then that knew nothing about historic masonry and where to get or how to make lime mortar and the proper care of historic masonry. And so it was written, I forget what year or when it was done, but I did it. I did it, and I think it was Sarah White who did the not editing, but the formatting, because I didn't know how to do it. But so we had an initial one, and it was passed out for years on the Historic Commission. It was passed out from the planning office and even the historic, the building commissioner's office. So as years went by and I got off the commission and so forth, I still tended to use it. People would ask me questions about it. And over time, it became dated. Not the basic information that's contained in it, but where to get it and so forth. And a couple of the formats changed a little bit. So I decided that it probably would be helpful to update it, which I did. And thankfully, Stephanie volunteered to format it and so forth. So this is kind of an updated version. The basic information is still consistent and is still there. It was drawn obviously from preservation briefs. I mean, the whole of downtown Newburyport was obviously built with lime mortar, soft bricks, and even softer lime mortar. And this was a useful tool. And I guess I'm offering the updated one to you if you would like to continue to use it or use it again if it's out of use. And I'd be certainly happy to answer any questions about it.
Okay, so and as far as the formatting, is Stephanie doing that now at this point? If there's any,
And she graciously did it, so. Yes.
okay. In other words, if we have any suggestions on that, she would be the one. Okay, well, I do have a couple of quick comments, and Andy had suggested one, which I agreed with. But before I do that, does anyone on the board, hopefully you've had a chance to look at this, anyone have anything that they noticed that could be improved or added or anything out of line? I see Mr. Fay's mic has become unmuted again. Chris, did you have something?
No, I was just curious from Tom, what's the, I looked at both documents and what's the big difference? Like what's been added or updated, like the short version?
The biggest difference is on the second page, the lime mortar resources.
Okay.
Okay. The old ones, one of them went belly up. They did not survive. That was the Virginia Lime Works, and the Pennsylvania Lime Works no longer uses that name. And I don't know if it went to a different generation or not, Andy DeGrunchi still is associated with it, and I think it's still his company, but they moved location. So that's changed. So, and I found another one, a round tower lime. So when people ask, you know, where do you get this stuff? Here are a few places where you can get it. There's one other change that I would like to point out on the custom house formula. The formula that they used when they did the first two sides of the custom house, they used 9 parts of lime, masonry sand. On the last two sides, because it ended up to be a better mix, they used 8 parts lime. I mean, 8 parts masonry sand. And it turned out to be a much better, that's the front and the left side. And when you take a look at the building, I can personally see the difference of how well it went on and how smoothly the job went. So, and I was a little bit involved in that one. So, so it's primarily the lime mortar resources, a change in the custom house formula. And I would like to point out of the Derby house, which Richard Irons did both times, they started out with a weaker mortar, and they had problems with it, and they eventually changed. They took down the chimney from the roof, from the roof up, and then they redid it with NHL 5, and it's worked nicely since. I talked to the park ranger, so that's a little change.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and these NHL numbers, those formulas that are posted in the Department of Interior brief, Tom? In other words, or is that something that a restoration mason would know what those are?
That's
Or
their restoration mason. If you go to the websites themselves,
of the suppliers?
of the suppliers, they're pretty good, and they lead you to say for instance, if you were going to use the brand Saint Astier, which is a French brand that's been in use for, I don't know, 200 years, whatever it is, they go into nice detail about the relative strengths and the qualities of each of them. The weakest is like 2.5, then it goes up to 3.5, and the strongest is 5.0. And that's a good quality, the 5.0. It's what I used in my house. So that's the, you know, there's 3 different strengths of L5. I wouldn't use 2.5 on too much today.
Okay. All right. Well, I've got, let me see if there are any other hands there. I don't see any. I've got a couple of quick comments, Tom. There's 1 or 2 about formatting, which I can talk to Stephanie about, just things like the main heading and title should go across both columns, that kind of thing. We can make, that's minor. We can fix that. One thing Andy pointed out is let's put a revision date on this. So that way, you know, anyone looking at it, whether it's next week or 2 years from now, they'll see that when this, you know, when this was last updated. So if it turns out we don't update it for another 3 or 4 years, people might, well, at least be aware of that, and we'll know to check. So so adding a revision date, that's an easy thing to do. I'm aware of a vendor that I don't think you're listed. Are you familiar with Florentine Renaissance Masonry?
I am familiar with them, but I haven't had good luck getting materials from them.
Oh, okay.
I know the Mason. I like him. He's given talks, but
Oh, okay. I didn't know them as a supplier. I think you can, you know, you can just, I just know them. I don't know how the Mason, I can't count on the actual Mason or masonry work they do. But you can order, you know, if you need lime or whatever, they do offer, you know, some of those antique type materials. So what I'll do, I'll send you a link to their website, and you can check that out. And if you think it's worth adding to your list, you can add it. Okay.
Yeah,
actually hosted a workshop with him in Newburyport. So
Oh, really?
very familiar with him.
Oh, okay.
Stephanie McDick.
Yeah, yeah, I recognize your voice, Stephanie. So do you think, well, yeah, Fabio Bardini is the guy's name that's associated with that. Do you see them as an unreliable resource, or?
Well, I don't say that. I just, when I tried to order it, I couldn't get it.
Okay, all right.
Well, I mean, I can talk to Fabio and
Mhm.
see if he's still interested. In fact,
Okay.
at one time, I tried to get him to have his supplies run out of Amesbury Industrial Supply.
Uh-huh,
They were gonna hold, so it would be available readily to people.
right.
So I brought him up and introduced him to Greg Jardis, and Greg agreed to just, stock his mortar.
Mhm.
But then
Okay,
Fabio,
fizzled out. Okay.
yeah, so I don't know. I'll be happy to call him.
All right. And the only other thing I have is, but it's something I consider important. Since this is sort of supplementary to the preservation brief #1, and that's assessing, cleaning, and water repellent, blah, blah, blah. There's that. And also, isn't there a, I can't see Andy doesn't have the whole page here. It might be scrolled down. I would like to see the, right at the very top, reference to the Department of Interior briefs and technical bulletins about historic masonry. And in the context of, your opening paragraph could simply say that, these are the kind of standard reference things that you should be looking at. Here's additional information with a local, focus on it to further assist you. You see what I'm saying? So that so that people are right up front are aware of the MPS stuff, the Park Service.
They're at the top of the second page.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
if you'd like them on the front page, that's easy enough.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, well, put it this way. If rather than reformat the whole thing, since I see what you're talking about here, you've got a list of sources and they listed there. So that's fine. Well, then all you need to do is add something on at the very beginning in your opening statement about this leaflet, whatever you want to call it, brochure, supplements information from the Department of Interior, then paren see detailed sources or something like that. So that way you don't have to do too much moving of stuff around. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that, we kind of have that up front. But other than that, I think this is a very helpful thing to have. So
May I just a brief comment on formatting?
Sure.
So we're happy to make these changes. The dating this is an excellent idea among the other good ideas. We've sent it to you in Word format.
Oh, okay.
If the Historical Commission is unhappy with formatting or fonts,
Well, I
those
should do a little disclaimer here.
are by members of the Historical Commission.
Yeah, I spent many years and have extensively studied both graphic design and information architecture and all that stuff. Did a lot of this type of work. So I don't come at this from
Wanted it to be clean and to fit on the two,
Yep. Oh yeah, yeah. I get all that. So anyway, so that's why I might be more, but since did you send it to me or to someone at the planning department, Stephanie?
I sent it to Caitlin and Diane, I believe.
Okay, all right. Well, they can forward it on to me. I'll be happy to take a look at that. The changes I'm talking about are pretty minor. So why don't we do this? The chair makes a motion that the chair works directly with the trust to put the final finishing touches on this document with those minor changes we just discussed, and then we can adopt it as something that the planning office and the building department, whoever, can hand out as a supplement to the resources from the Department of Interior. So the motion is to take that action. Does anyone second that motion?
Mark Sandron, I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So just to did everyone understand what the motion is? Or if you want, I can.
I sort of, sorry, this is Patricia.
Yep.
I think that the trust has worked hard to offer this to us, to
Mhm.
donate it to us, and it's a very valuable thing. I think that we are able on our own to do any reformatting or annotating or anything. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't want to burden them by saying, you're giving us a gift, but we'd like to meet with you to make sure that the gift is entirely in the right typeface.
Yeah,
I guess
that's pretty much what I had in mind, actually,
Okay, I
Patricia.
would rather that we just said thank you, and I'm happy to help you, with any sort of reformatting. I really
Right.
appreciate what they've done. I don't want to burden them anymore.
Yeah, well, really what I had in mind since we went there is that I would go ahead and put in those things that I wanted to do and just let them see it before we adopted it, just so that in case they had any strenuous
Okay,
objection to anything, that's all, just to give it the okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kind of just a courtesy thing, since they did the work behind it, and they definitely should get the credit for it. In fact, I didn't see, did you take credit for this? Because you should, as
Well,
developing it.
it was done originally under the Newburyport Historical Commission, and then
When Tom was a member.
when I was
Yeah.
vice chair or whatever.
Yeah.
the position.
Okay. Just
So
wanna,
I think it's certainly reasonable that, that you continue it or have the updated version.
yeah, no, I think we can vote to accept it now, and so that you don't have to keep coming back to beat this horse to death, because I think it's a very useful document. I'm very happy that you took the time to update it as you did. It's a good thing, put it that way. So there's still a motion on the floor that we need to vote on. So let me do the standard roll call. So just in case anyone's forgotten, what the motion is that we basically accept the revised document from as presented, and with the in a format that we can make minor edits to, and I'll be happy to have the originators, that is the trust, review the changes we made, but I'm pretty confident they'll be fine with them. So slightly restated, that's the motion that's before us. So I'm going to do the roll call, see who's in favor. Mr. Syndrome?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McNamee? Peter? I see your lips moving, but you seem to be muted.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Pecknick?
Yes.
Thank you. And the chair votes yes. And I know we want to keep things brief, but I just can't help asking one quick question about this, since you know something about this masonry, if you're still there, Tom. I was a little bit surprised to read that I know about the how the brick absorbs heat and then radiates it for a long time. And of course, I have experience with that in my own home. But it says new brick does not do this. Was not aware of that. Is there some?
It absolutely does not do this. In fact, I have a friend who built a brand new chimney using new brick, nice big fireplace, and he freezes in the winter. He builds these huge fireplaces. When he runs it, if he has it going, I don't know, maybe 8 hours, he starts to get a little heat out of it, but he just doesn't throw the heat. He doesn't absorb it. It's too hard. It doesn't absorb it and doesn't throw it back into the room like historic brick does. The old brick is much softer, so it can absorb the heat or the cold and throw it back into the room even when you have no fire there.
Yeah, and and I presume it was properly designed with,
Properly designed. He had a good mason. It looked great, but it was a lousy source of heat.
Interesting. Okay, thank you, Tom. All right, well, thank you very much, Tom and Stephanie from the Preservation Trust. Appreciate your work on this, and we'll get this wrapped up. And thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can we go back to the agenda, Andy?
Yeah, my apologies. Sorry, my ear froze up.
Yep, not a problem. Not a problem. Okay. Oops. had that in the wrong place. I think the MHC survey and planning grant. I might let you and Caitlin talk a little bit about that, but I'll just introduce by saying, we've been talking about this for a while, so I know we all know what we're talking about here. This is the grant. We've have some money to hire people, an expert to help us update the list of contributing structures. And since this work was last undertaken now nearly 40 years ago, it's important that we do this. My understanding is that the two things are going on at the planning office, and I really, really appreciate the planning office staff for stepping up to this. The first one is working on the RFP, and Patricia Pecknick, our vice chair, also did a significant chunk of work on this. So the planning office is kind of combining some of what Patricia's did with some of what they've kind of their template type stuff that they've got in the past for RFPs. So, and if at any point, Caitlin or Andy, if I say anything that's mistaken, feel free to correct me, but they are working on that RFP so we can get that out and see if we can, get somebody on board reasonably soon to start working on. And simultaneously, or along with that, they have, I believe it's Diane on staff there, she's the one that came up with that map that I think I talked about a couple of weeks ago. With all the hundreds and thousands of little dots, colored dots. And they're starting to try to compile a list to identify some of these properties that should be surveyed. So that's anything that you, Andy or Caitlin, anything you'd like to add to that the board should know about?
No, thank you, Chair. I think we just want to make sure, and Caitlin, I think will handle the distribution of this to folks that might be interested, and then get them out to some of the folks that we know we want to get it out to, right? To make sure that they are able to submit responses. But that was a typical advertisement process for these things, but we also want to send it out to a few firms directly just to make sure that we flag it for them and make sure that they try to submit something. But I think the bottom line, and Caitlin, jump in if there's anything you think I'm missing or you want to add, but I think we want to make sure that the commission, I think it makes sense, I guess, from my perspective. I think it would make a lot of sense here, given all the factors, to maybe prioritize additional Form Bs for structures that are not protected or captured under the ordinance, the DCARD ordinance in particular, so that in terms of getting your biggest bang for your buck. There's been discussion about updating other Form Bs and things like that. And if those are all options, it's up to the commission, of course. But in terms of the scope of work, we want to confirm that. And my assumption is that you get the biggest bang for your buck out of developing Form Bs for structures that could then be incorporated by reference essentially into the ordinance so that they're protected in some way, rather than prioritizing, say, an update of an old Form B that may not actually change the regulatory protections that might be applicable to those structures. I say that because we have these local ordinances now that may, or sort of quasi-historical ordinances that may help to better protect those structures. So to me, there's a tie there to maybe prioritizing those. And again, we defer to you, but if that is the case, then it would seem to make sense to utilizing the information, like Caitlin said in the staff report. There'll be more information coming from Diane and Caitlin on sort of what we do have and some maps that might help to illustrate, in the district what we have. In the city what we have, but having some sort of prioritization list from the commission, roughly in the area of 110 to 130 such structures, because basically in talks with Mass Historical, they believe that we'll get roughly that amount, somewhere in that range of these from the available funds. So that being the case, I think it would make a lot of sense to me to have the consultant work on the Form Bs rather than having some of their time diluted working on prioritization of those Form Bs. It's easier to say, here's the 110 we want to have done,
right,
than to have them say, well, spend some of your time, helping us select them, and then you have less time available for the actual Form B work. So,
right.
So my thinking is that if you can help to prioritize that list, with the forthcoming information beyond what Diane and Caitlin have already sent out or provided, then we can just roll that into the RFP distribution. They know which, approximately how many we're asking for. We have a clear indication of, it doesn't have to be exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, but knowing where the top 110 to 130 are, we can then make sure that in the proposals we get that they're going to cover the broadest range of those as possible, the highest ranked ones. So.
Okay. So I'm going to try to summarize that in a slightly more brief form for everybody. And that's that number one, rather than have the, we can do the identification of the target properties, because that doesn't require any special expertise, and we're familiar with the territory and so on. Let them, so rather than have them charge time to do that, we can do that and let them just work on the actual development of Form Bs. And number two, the priority being get unprotected properties on there a little bit more as a higher priority than updating obsolete ones that need updating. One thing so that's kind of the short and fancy. Oh, and last thing is that we will get, start getting some preliminary lists that we can work with. The one thing I would add, Andy, and maybe maybe the staff could even do this, is I was kind of frustrated that I couldn't seem to find a succinct summary of exactly how one goes about updating a Form B that needs updating. I'm assuming it can't be, well, it might be a wrong assumption. I was thinking it wouldn't be as hard as doing a whole new one from scratch, but maybe that's wrong. So I'd love to, get just a quick kind of step-by-step, here's how you can update one, because we might be able to do some of those on our own. And I see one of my compatriots has a hand up. Tricia, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to let you know, Glenn, I do have a list that I've compiled of houses in the DCOD that are in the north end that I think would be really good to have Form Bs for. I'm not really good with the south end, though.
Okay, so Andy, have you given that list to anyone on the planning board yet, Patricia, like Diane or Caitlin?
No, I haven't. I thought maybe, everybody, if anyone else has any contributions, or maybe I'll talk to Tom and Stephanie and get the, it's very tilted towards the neighborhood I live in right now. So
Right.
I thought maybe.
That's fine. In fact,
and the DCOD that's in the south end as well, but I haven't attempted to do any of the south end yet.
Okay.
Patricia, those are structures that don't already have Form Bs, I assume, right?
Right. They don't have Form Bs, and a lot of them are, it's that Carter, Warren, Ocean Mills. A lot of them are smaller houses that I think are the most in danger of maybe, being added on to in inappropriate ways in the future. So I can send you that list, or I can wait till, the commission has the 110 and we can send it all as one document.
Just to clarify, because I think Andy said they have Form Bs, but you're saying they do not have Form Bs, right?
The ones that don't have Form Bs, I have on the list.
Yeah, so these are ones that don't have any protection at this point, Andy.
Right, yeah, so I mean, again, if there's general consensus on that list, if you want to take a look at it as a commission between now, it can be distributed, staff report to the whole commission for the next meeting, you could take a look.
Okay, great, thank you, I'll do that.
Yeah, and if I mean, again, all things being equal, if there's general agreement on that list, then, that kind of, clears right off the bat, a chunk of what we want the consultant to do, and then we're just narrowing it down to the remaining that we can squeeze out of them. So, I'll defer to you, but how you want to do it. But I think if the commission can, as a whole, just say, yeah, we sort of bless this, whatever that list ends up being, maybe it's two lists merged together or revised. The sooner we have that list, the sooner we can incorporate in the, the request for proposals, and the sooner we'll get them underway with the work they need to do. So that's all.
Okay.
Hey, Andy, where is the boundary between Newburyport and West Newbury as you're going out Story Ave, 113?
Sorry, I just accidentally muted myself.
Yep.
Yeah, so you got to go. Do you know where you go down to when you go to Maudsley State Park? If you go, actually, it might be easier for me to show you on the map.
Okay. The reason I ask is because there's a really nice old house on Turkey Hill Road. I'm not sure if it's Newburyport or West Newbury.
Yeah, let me just, I'll show you right. You're on talking about Story Ave in particular, right?
Well, and this particular property is on Turkey Hill.
Oh, Turkey Hill.
Road.
Yeah, so let me just show you the, I got a few things that are overlapping here, but you see in this browser here I have open?
Yep. Yep.
So at any rate, this is, you can see the city line is kind of shaded out right there, right? So this is
okay. It's by the
river. So
river.
everything in here is city of Newburyport. So I don't know if you might have been looking at something along here. But.
Yeah, can you scroll it further down so where Turkey Hill meets like where Middle Road is and so on? Yeah, keep going. Yep. Okay. Yep. Keep going. Okay, there's Crowley, and yep, keep going. All right, so this is all still Newburyport, right?
Yep, all still Newburyport. Yep, that whole neighborhood down there. So
Oh, all right. Does anyone on the board know the house I'm talking about? It's a really beautiful old house, and it looks like yeah, it's definitely in this section. It's probably somewhere in the vicinity of where you see Goldsmith Drive is there. It's looking in from this direction. It's on the west side of Turkey Hill Road, and I just know about it because my daughter, when she was like in school, one of her schoolmates was there. It's one of those. It's either that one there, 9254 in the corner. It might be one of the other ones. I know it's a corner a lot like that. That looks like it might not. Anyway, it's a nice old house. Yeah, that's probably not it because I think it would have had like a big chimney and all that because it is well preserved now. That's the other thing that you know makes it a good candidate. It hasn't been all messed up, so to speak. Okay, well, thank you, Andy, for that. And knowing that, maybe I'll put it on my to-do list to get that address and see if it already is listed. And if not, we can add that to the list. And for everyone on the board here, if in your respective neighborhoods, if you know that there's some nice old houses it's very easy to check the list, see if it's already listed. And if it's not, by all means, just jot it down. We'll start putting this list together. The more the merrier, so to speak, because it's if the easier we could make this go for the folks down at the planning office, the better. And plus, especially if we have ones that we've identified as good candidates, that carries a lot of weight. Okay, so let's move right along. The only thing we have left are, well, there's approval of minutes and update from the chair and or planning director. Why don't I do that now, and then we'll do the approval of minutes, if that's okay with folks, because we usually end with that. I'll be brief. Which a relevant thing to say because the main update from the chair and the title is meeting management. It particularly struck a couple of us after the last meeting that we need, or I should say I need to have a little bit better control and management over how long applicants speak, how long things get to go on, and just have a little bit better organizations, because I do want to be respectful of your time. I know a lot of you are still working. You have no choice of sleeping late the following morning or anything like that. You got to, get to bed at a certain time and get up early in the next morning and so on. So I want to be respectful of that. So what Patricia and I talked about was that, we typically will look at the materials ahead of time anyway. So I think asking you to make sure that you have familiarized yourself with the materials is kind of an easier task to do if it means that you won't have to sit through quite so much of going over the same stuff in the meeting. If we can tell the applicant that, look, you've submitted the materials in a timely way. We've had several days to look at them, so we've familiarized ourselves with them. So why don't we can give you 10 minutes. That should be plenty of time to summarize and hit the high points and so on. And that way we can kind of keep things moving along. And between that and trying to get better adherence to that kind of standard formula that the other boards use, where the applicant makes their presentation, the board can ask any clarifying questions if they want. Then there's a public comment period if it's appropriate for that particular matter, and then deliberation and any vote that needs to take place. And we'll try to kind of keep things on an even keel, so to speak, but I can use a sailing metaphor. If it wasn't for this meeting, I'd be out on a sailboat tonight, racing night, my friend's boat. So does that sound good to folks? Patricia, I see your hand.
Yeah, can we hear from different people about
Yeah.
maybe a wish lists of things and appropriate orders and
Sure.
time limits and stuff? I sure all of us have ideas about how to streamline things. So
Yep.
or Peter or Chris or Mark, if you have any suggestions, I think we should.
Yeah, I think they do. I see all kinds of hands up. Mark's went up first. I'm sorry, Patricia. Did I cut you off, Patricia, or you all set?
No, not at all. I'm done.
Okay, Mark, your hand was up.
Just a quick, two quick suggestions. One, really putting a time limit that obviously is not rigid, but a time limit on some of the discussions I think would help tremendously. When I ran meetings, I found that to be extremely good in terms of guidelines for people, all those involved, to know exactly how much time they had to devote to whatever they had to say. The second thing that I find sometimes a little bit irking is some of the digressions that happen that may have no bearing on what really the topic is. And that's something that I think we should try to avoid and try to focus exactly on what we're dealing with and not sort of go on to tangents. That's all I have to say.
Guilty as charged. Peter, you had a hand up too?
Yes, thank you. Everything that Mark just said, I agree with. I do think that we do our applicants a disservice, both the applicant who's currently presenting and the applicants waiting to be heard, if we're not controlling time. So I think it's better. In the last meeting, Chuck Griffin, I felt bad that he came prepared with a 64 slide presentation to a meeting that we don't have time to see 64 slides. We can possibly look at them beforehand, but to think that during the meeting is an appropriate time to present it, that's on us for letting that be taken for granted. So I think establishing a time limit, we don't have to be militant about the time limit, but we should be consistent. And I would suggest that we consider giving applicants 10 minutes to present, and then at the chair's discretion, we can extend for 5 minutes beyond that if they're not done. Any extensions beyond that, I think, should be voted on. Again, out of respect for the people waiting to be heard.
Right.
And with regard, and we're already doing 2-minute responses from during public hearing. I think that we need to stick to that very carefully. So we should have somebody keeping time, and we should allow that person to just interrupt when necessary and say it's time, or 15 seconds as they were doing the other night on the ZBA meeting.
Right.
And with regard to what Mark just said about digressions, I have all the respect in the world for the hard job that you do, Glenn. But a couple of good examples happened this evening. Tom Kulturjohn did a lot of work, and Stephanie did a lot of work putting together a terrific pamphlet, but there really wasn't any need for the digression into the type of brick for fireplaces at the end of that. It was germane to what was being discussed, but it wasn't germane to what we were trying to accomplish. Nor was the discussion of the house out near West Newbury, one house out of the many that we're talking about redoing. So these sorts of digressions that any one of us could introduce, I think we need to be very careful of and avoid, because they add up and they make a long meeting. Right. And I am one of the people that has to get up and go out to work the next morning.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Peter. Thanks. As I said earlier to Mark's comment, guilty as charged in the digression. If we didn't have such a light agenda, I wouldn't have gotten into the whole brick discussion. The Turkey Hill one, I was mostly interested in where the boundary was to know if that was something I should look into or not. But point well taken. Just gonna try not to get defensive about that at all. Patricia's hand is up again, but Chris,
Yeah,
I see your hand went.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Fay.
Oh, Patricia, go ahead, Patricia.
No, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I will echo what's been said. I think I think Peter makes a good point about respecting not just our time, because I too have to get up, but not much longer, and but also respecting the other applicants and the people that are waiting. So I would like to see, I've been thinking about this. It seems like we have a 4-part process, and whatever time limits we place on those 4 parts, I'd like to see those be sort of clearly delineated. The first is the presentation. I think Glenn makes a good point. The 64 slide, I have 64 slide presentations that'll take me days to get through. So I think that the jail, we've heard about the jail. We've reheard about the jail, and that's just an example. But that's the presentation part. I think that either then we have questions about it, but I would urge us to maybe allow the presentation to happen and then switch to a question and answer period, and then open it up for public comment or vice versa. During that public comment, I don't think we should be interjecting. I think the public has the right to make their comment for 2 minutes if that's what we decide. And then we deliberate. And what I've noticed is that we've got the jail, and I think we had 2 lawyers last time, right? And we had the one up on High Street when we had, I think 5 or 6 people had to talk on that. And then there's the, can I clarify this? And I think once the question answer period, presentation and question answer period is over with, and we're deliberating, we're not in a court of law. And so there should be no interjections from the audience at that point. That's not their role. They've had their say. If we had any further questions, we would ask them. And I think in the current situation that we're in, that requires the control of the microphones. And so I'm not in charge of the microphones, but I noticed that there's been, if they don't like the way the deliberations are going, and the last time with the jail is a great example of that, then they interject. He'd interject twice, disrupted the discussion, and then said we should delay this. We're never really allowed to finish our deliberation, because essentially I have to imagine, and I won't go on too much longer, but in a court of law, you're allowed to object. Where I come from, and I know where Patricia comes from, is in a classroom, you're not allowed to object. And the class is over at a certain time, and that's just the way it goes. And sometimes that you have to pick it up the next day or the next week. And I don't see anything here being an emergency. I understand people want to fix their homes, put a porch on, whatever else it is, but I think we have to sort of be consistent with the time. I wouldn't just open up the can of worms of, we can allow people to extend that, because that's what they're going to ask for. So give an inch, they're going to take a mile. So I'd like to see the time be fairly reasonable, but we're consistent with the timekeeper and just say, your time is up, sir, or madam, as the case may be. Thank you.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
all
I think what they did was with the ZBA, they would give you a 15-second warning when you had spoken for 1:45, and that's helpful. Frustrating, but helpful. Patricia, did you want to?
Yes, I think it'd be great if you were to announce at the beginning of every meeting what the format is. Some attorneys appear frequently and they know the format, but for people, who, as Chris are saying, they want to put a dormer on their garage or whatever, they don't know what to expect. So if you were to say, first we do this is 10 minutes, this is 5 minutes, you'll be muted, or when we're back in City Hall, we won't have to worry about muting people, hopefully. I think it could be explained to the applicants that everyone on the commission has already thoroughly reviewed the materials and the presentation, and that we're maybe eager to see that 15 minutes, but 15 minutes is sort of it. And I know that it's tempting to ask questions or make comments during that 15-minute presentation, but I think that's where we often get into trouble, so if we can just listen for the 15. And then I also, looking at the ZBA, the way they do it, it seems very efficient to have public comment immediately after the applicant presents, because sometimes the public will ask questions that eliminate some of the things that I was going to ask about. And I don't mind not announcing a 2-minute limit for public comment. We rarely have public comment. I think, for example, tonight, if we were at a meeting and we had asked Tom to speak for 2 minutes on brick, maybe we really needed 5 minutes. The public really educates us in important ways at times. So I'm not so bent on that. I would say also, looking at the way Rob runs things, if we reopen the floor to the applicant after our deliberations, then we should reopen the floor to the public as well. The applicants are members of the public. I want to treat everyone equally. And the last thing I would say is, I don't think we should review incomplete applications. So on 276 High, one part of the application was missing. That got me griping about, how come we don't have these photos? How can we review it? It happened again on the jail. And so, you're definitely in charge of the agenda. And I think if if something like that is happening, you know, it's easier for the applicant to know that they will have to come back another day. And it would be great to have a timekeeper. I don't think it should be me, but it'd be great to have a timekeeper. I know on the planning board, Leah McGavern's really good at saying 2 minutes, and Stephen
Mm.
Deloy is good at saying you got 15 more seconds, and people are used to that. So somebody should keep time and just say, that's it.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that incomplete applications. I know, I think that the one we had today down at out of Plum Island may have, I'm not sure that was complete in certain ways, because I think they're supposed to provide some of that historical information. I'm sure you recall seeing, you know, Sanborn insurance maps and all that stuff that Attorney Mead often presents. And much as sometimes it seems excessive, it also can be quite helpful too. So there's that. So I'm gonna, and they may talk to you about how to handle, or Caitlin, how to handle that. Like what I'll do is I'll, check, or I assume you guys check that everything that's supposed to be there is there, right?
Yeah, so obviously, if there's any concerns or questions, certainly raise that concern to us. And I mean, obviously, there are occasionally things that someone might miss for some reason, but generally speaking, yes, staff here are checking and should be checking to make sure that things are complete so no one's time is wasted. We actually proposed a zoning amendment recently to make it explicitly clear in the ordinance that nothing is complete and the clock is not ticking on any application until it's completely submitted. With all the attachments that are
right. That's a good point. I forgot about it. I did see that in the revisions, and is referring to major overhauls on these provisions, and that is one of them. If let me postpone that. If you guys want to hear more about that, we can talk more about that. But I want to finish this discussion about the meeting management. So, Peter, I think your hand went back up. Did you want to make another comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quickly to Patricia's comments. And I can't remember specifically what you said that triggered this, but I think applicants should come to the meeting knowing that they have a time limit. I don't think we should be informing them at that time. We don't want to have somebody put their heart and soul into a 20-minute presentation and then tell them to cut it in half. That's doing them a service also.
Yeah, it was probably the discussion, the mentioning the discussion about the jail and so forth that probably triggered that thought. I had the same thought actually, in that we can work with Caitlin or whomever to make sure that applicants know that up front, so they're not taken by surprise.
Yeah, this is Andy. Knowing Chuck Griffin and Nick Cracknell, I think, and the number of slides that were in that particular one, I think that comes from a constantly evolving design, ideas and so forth. And I think that at what point it was well taken. I think that, ultimately it's up to the board to make it clear. We can explain to the applicants and let them know right off the bat, there's time limits and there's, it wouldn't be realistic to present a 60 or 120 slide, presentation. Chuck gave a great one on the Bartlett Mall that was very long to the Parks Commission and others at one point, but I do not think that what was discussed in that matter, to Peter's point, needed to have that many slides or that many different renderings or illustrations to illustrate what was being discussed, given that it was in sort of a half-baked status anyway. I think we can certainly, and we do, try to let applicants know when something is not orderly or prepared and so forth, but I think that time could have been saved in having a more refined application or material submitted. And I think that Attorney Roloff could probably understand those factors, but he was brought in, I think, later than the presentation slides that obviously were put together by Chuck and Nick Cracknell. So,
Nick, I'm sorry, Andy, is that in the instructions that applicants are given anywhere in written form?
There is no instruction that says your slides are limited to, or your, meeting will be limited. That's up to the chairs to decide, in terms of running the meetings. But we do let applicants know that they're not expecting to have, or should not be expecting to have, an unlimited amount of time to go through an endless array of slides. So irrespective of what folks may think about certain things, there are certain applicants and certain usual suspects who know how to prepare a presentation that is succinct and to the point, and that wasn't, unfortunately, one of them.
Sure. And not to, I don't think we need to necessarily pick on Chuck Griffin's presentation only. It can happen with anyone's presentation. I think that it would be a good idea for this guidance to be in written form somewhere. It's terrific if they're being told that, but I think if people going on the website to find out how they make application, et cetera, showing up at City Hall to fill out forms and whatnot, if they see it in writing, they're just that much better prepared.
Yeah, that's a fair point. With the online permitting, we are trying to put in additional instructions for folks. And so there are certain things we can't control, like we can't prevent them from uploading a presentation with so many slides, but we can certainly give an instruction that says, your slide should not exceed this, right? So, we can certainly put better instructions out there for these things. That we could definitely, Caitlin, Diane, and I can adapt to get those instructions clearly out to folks. At the end of the day, when an issue like that arises, we can touch base with the chair and the vice chair, in terms of preparation for the meeting. But you as board members can also make it very clear. Like you said earlier, I think that if the chair is giving an outline at the beginning, that helps to frame it for everybody, because you won't be spending unnecessary time on something that could be done in a little more efficient time.
Yeah.
May I say something?
Yes, I was just going to ask you,
Glenn,
Tricia, go ahead.
I'm aware that it is not only rarely a strategy of attorneys to try to overwhelm boards, to provide, make arguments that aren't relevant, to have speakers who are not speaking on topic, and to kind of bore and exhaust the board into, okay, well, I'm confused on this, or I don't. So the 15-minute time limit is also important, because we can focus for that long, and we can ask the applicants to focus for that long.
Yeah. Thanks. And that Andy mentioned these introductions that I do. For tonight, I sort of prepared and semi-scripted the introduction to the demo delay thing, to try to keep that crisp. And I did that partly because, we've had, confusion might be too strong a word, but we've had discussions in the past about, exactly how that's supposed to work and so on. I think we've got it pretty much down now. We've got the flow chart. That's all helpful. Did you feel that the way I introduced the whole 7 Harbor Street discussion was helpful? Too wordy, about right? I'm just asking for feedback here on that, so I know how to adjust that. Yeah, Peter?
I don't have a response to that, Glenn.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
Oh, okay. I saw the hand. Did you want to say something else?
I do have something else.
Sure. Go ahead.
But I'll pause and wait for answers.
Okay.
To your question.
Well, does anyone want to comment on those little intros? I think I'm trying to keep them. I do them both for us, but also for the applicant. More so if the applicant does not have an attorney, then it's kind of more necessary. Obviously, if someone's got attorney meet and so on, they're really not going to need much of that. So in those cases, I tend to keep it pretty brief. All right, so I guess people don't really have much comment on that. So why don't you again, Peter? And
I just wanted to withdraw part of what I said earlier after Chris's comment. I think he's exactly right. You give a mouse a cookie and you're in trouble. So establish a time limit and not establish any expectation of extending that.
Oh, okay.
I think is in order. So what I suggested was establish a 10-minute time limit, and the chair has discretion to extend for 5, and then the board votes on additional 5 or whatnot. I do think that will very quickly get abused and become 20-minute presentations that get extended.
All right. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing on that?
Sure.
If you set expectations, but it's like a teacher trick, right? You tell the kids something is due on a Friday, and then like on Thursday, you guys probably need an extra day.
I always do that.
It's a teacher trick, You give a kid a C- and they go, "How come I got a C-?" And you go, "Well, the reality is it was a D+, but I know you tried hard on it. So if you want me to look at it again, I will, but just know that I kind of helped you out a little bit." And then they usually kind of go away. And my point is that if we tell everybody they've got extra time, like let them ask, put this simply, like let them ask, "Can I have more time, Mr. Chair?" And then you can say, I'll allow 2 more minutes, and it's at your discretion.
Yeah.
Otherwise they see it as like, of course I get extra time.
Yeah. All right. Well, sort of you're both right, so to speak. And the way I was what the idea that was forming in my mind is that it is part of the chair's responsibility, I think, to manage that. The chair does have quite a bit of discretion, but I think along with that discretion, there's the responsibility of managing it and, using it properly, right? So not letting things spiral out of control. But yet, if there's something that really demands extra time, you've got the discretion to grant it. So yeah, I agree with both of those. Mark, you made a gesture there that like you were thinking of something. Did that inspire a certain thought?
Just to follow up on your comment about setting the rules.
Uh-huh.
I think those rules should also be spelt out for those applicants so that they understand. I think by now, all of us probably have fairly good understanding of those rules.
Mhm.
And I think if the applicants are going to come prepared, they ought to know how it's going to work. And so it may not be necessary to go through the exercise every time, because that too extends the time a little further.
Mhm.
I think,
You're talking about like the introduction saying we have to vote on this and then we have to decide if it's significant and all that. Is that what you're talking about?
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Glenn, I appreciate my colleagues so much and want to learn from them and hear their arguments and be persuaded by them. So I don't want us to cheat ourselves out of, having a good solid 15 minutes to talk to each other. And so we're trying to, condense the time for the other things, mostly so that we're being, we're fully and fairly deliberating and aren't feeling rushed or tired or like we have to quickly move on. But thanks for letting us have this conversation. I think it's really important. And I know that when we're back in person, it's less likely that, that this, we'll have meetings that go on this long because, we're in the room and it's sort of easier to say, okay, let's move on, right? It's hard over Zoom.
Okay. Well, as ironically or interestingly, this was one of the most robust discussions we've had in terms of participation of everybody. And I really appreciate two things. I appreciate your participation, but I especially appreciate your candor and being willing to give me feedback, even if it's not as positive, or pointing out things that I could do better. Because if you don't do that, then I might continue to not improve. So I do appreciate that.
But Glenn,
And so thank you for that.
Glenn, it's because you care and you get engaged and you talk with the applicant. No, and you're trying to work things out. It's because you're into the process. That's, you know what I mean? It doesn't reflect on anything other than that. It's just,
Yeah. Well, I did a personality profile many years ago, and I was described as high excitement, low restraint, which translates into getting excited about what's being discussed and not exercising sometimes enough restraint about, yeah, that's very nice, but you don't have to, whatever. So that's relevant to the brick thing, Peter. You should have had a little more restraint. Anyway, so thanks. All right. Any other comments on that? If not, onward and upward. We can, now I don't think we approved the minutes, so we can move on to that. So this is the minutes of 5:13. Thank you, Gretchen, for deciphering that long discussion about the jail. Is there a motion to approve the minutes, or is there any? I should point out, in one spot you misspelled my name, but in other spots you did not, so I'm sure it was just a typo. Is there a motion to approve the minutes or any comment on them?
This is Joe. I move to approve the minutes from May 13.
Thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
I'll second, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, okay, Mark, you have to, well, we won't count you for this since you were not here. Christopher Fay?
Yes.
Okay. Peter?
Yes.
Okay. Joe, Joe Morgan, you were here, right?
Yes, actually, I think that would be the minutes from 5:27.
You're right. I said 5:13, right?
Yeah.
Actually, that's what it's at. So they must have copied from an old thing there.
Yeah. But I moved to, and I do vote yes. to
Okay,
approve those minutes.
of 5:27. Thank you. Patricia?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair is good with them as well. I think the only other thing is on the agenda is adjournment. If you want to move on, the chair will hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion
I
to
move that we adjourn. This is Peter.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Is there a second?
I'll second. Mark Sundron.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, go through the roll again. Mark?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Okay, Peter?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Okay, Patricia?
Yes.
And the chair is yes as well. So thank you all. Appreciate your participation. Hope you'll have a good evening. And did we avoid the jinx of going too long when we said we weren't?
Nice. Very well done.
Okay, all right, very good.
Excellent work.
Mark,
Okay,
Mark gets to open every meeting by saying it's going to be a really long meeting.
Okay,
Happy to do that.
All
all
right.
right. Thank you all for your time.
Night, everybody.
Everyone.
Night,
Good
all.
night, everyone.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.